Let's bring in our guest, James Carafano from the Heritage Foundation. James, great to see you.
Good to be with you.
Let's go ahead and start with Steve Mnuchin's comments today and potential sanctions here. The U.S. is saying, we're putting something on the table, but we're not pulling the trigger just yet. Why wait?
Right. Well, first of all, I think Mnuchin's kind of channeling Trump's inner showman. Look, we can't shut down an economy. Can't shut down North Korea and Iran. We wouldn't shut down Turkey. Having said that, the U.S. could do pretty damaging sanctions on Turkey, and that would make sense if the Turks do things which are worth sanctioning. The U.S. advised them against this incursion, and they said, look, bad things can happen here. So if there's a humanitarian crisis, if there's ethnic cleansing, if they were to release ISIS prisoners, if they would do things that would harm U.S. interests or make the situation there worse, I think it would be appropriate for the U.S. to use sanctions. The
Trump administration is in a tough spot, allies in some senses on both sides here. And the issue, as you mentioned, is if there are civilian casualties. What happens if that, becomes a serious issue? Does the U.S. take the next step, going even past sanctions potentially?
I think that we have limited interests and limited capabilities and limited influence in the region. I mean, we're not going to jump into the middle of the Syrian conflict and try to solve it. It's been going on for years. If we could have jumped in and solved it, we would have done that years ago. Innocents get hurt in war. That's a tragic fact of life. What's inappropriate is to intentionally target innocents or to conduct operations in a careless and unprofessional way in which innocents get harmed or intentionally hurt. So I think the U.S. will have to be monitoring what the Turkish government does. And if they exceed what a professional military should and ought to do, then I think it's appropriate for the U.S. to take sanctions, particularly since the U.S. warned them. People keep saying that we greenlighted this, which is not true. The U.S. advised this was not a good thing because there were grave risks. And so the U.S. warned them to begin with. So we've warned them. And I think if they do something wrong, we punish them. And we have a precedence for this. Remember, we told the Russians not to buy the S-400. It was incompatible with the F-35 that they were building with us. They decided to do it anyway. And we did exactly what we said we were going to do. We took away the F-35. We ended our joint production, and the Turks paid a painful price for that.
James, this is interesting because it's coming at a time where we're saying we're going to take our troops out of Syria, but we're going to add troops to Saudi Arabia. This is as the escalations with Iran continue. The latest with that Iranian tanker being damaged by missiles today. Iran's not blaming anyone per se, but where does that conflict go from here?
Yeah, I think we have to be technically correct here. Even the president who's said, let's end endless wars, has never said we're taking all our troops out of Syria. He said he'd like to do that, but he's also said, and it's our official policy, that a small number of U.S. troops would stay there to protect U.S. interests. And that includes trying to prevent these mass genocides and mass refugees, which are destabilizing to the region, helping prevent Iran from taking a foothold in Syria, that they can attack Israel, our closest ally, and also continue to make sure that ISIS doesn't come roaring back. So our troops are still there because they're looking after our interests. What we're doing in Saudi Arabia is identical. Saudi Arabia is part of pushing back against Iran. Iran is the chief destabilizing threat in the region, and so limiting Iran's capacity to do bad in the region, deterring that behavior by having additional forces in Saudi Arabia, those things go together. It's trying to calm down the Middle East, reduce conflict, and most importantly, reduce it in a sustainable way. The notion we can't have thousands of troops there forever, it doesn't make sense for us. So what the president is trying to do is to find solutions where we're there and we have influence, but it's in a sustainable way over time where regional allies pick up pick up a chunk of that, and we do it in a way that we can have peace and stability year in and year out.
James, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time tonight.